On this week's edition of the Pick Six, unfortunately, it is season recap and look ahead time. The Packers season is over with another playoff loss to the 49ers. We're going to break it all down, everything we learned this year, and all the reasons to be positive going forward about these Green Bay Packers. This is the latest edition of the Pick Six. Let's go. And welcome to the Pick Six with Jacob Westendorf. I am Brendan Dworzinski. Welcome to the show. This is always the saddest one of the year, right after a Green Bay Packers playoff loss. No Super Bowl this year, but honestly, while there are no moral victories, the fact that this team, after what we saw from them in October, and frankly, what we saw from them against New York and Tampa Bay back-to-back near the end of the season, the fact that they got to this point and looked as good as they did for so much of this abbreviated playoff run, obviously very impressive and obviously a whole lot of reason to be excited about what is still to come for this team. And Jacob, you got to be in the trenches with this group for a lot of the year in Green Bay, traveling around the country with this team. And I think it's fair to say, and we're going to have plenty of time on this show, we're going to have plenty of time throughout the offseason to talk about what we learned this year, what these experiences were like, what it means going forward for this franchise. But I have to imagine it was almost whiplash-like to go from the highs of the first couple weeks of the season with that demolition of the Bears and then the game against the Saints, which was improbable, if not almost impossible, to the doldrums in October, to what we've witnessed over the last few weeks, last couple of months. Kind of incredible, all things considered, really every single part of this season that led us to this point.
Yeah, I think, at the beginning of the year, we talked a lot about how there would be a roller coaster ride with this team. And I think a lot of people that said that kind of forgot what that meant. I remember talking with some friends after they beat Chicago, and then somebody was like, "Oh, could they be like 6-1 at the bye?" And I'm like, "Well, no, like they're going to lose games they're not supposed to." And then predictably they lost to Atlanta 4 days later. Like that was one example. And then after they lost to Atlanta, it was like, well, then they beat New Orleans, and it was like, oh, if they beat Detroit, they could easily be like, 5-2 at the end of October. It's like, well, no. And then when they beat Kansas City, it was, are they going to go 11-6 and maybe win the division? It's like, no, they're going to lose a game. Like that's the ups and downs of this team, man. And that to me is one of the things that when you talk about the expectations for 2024, that are things that have to change, is the down, the expectations now are very, very high and deservedly so going into 24. I wrote an article that's coming out later this week talking about how, this year, everybody talked about, playing with house money and it's the beginning of something. And, every playoff loss with Aaron Rodgers kind of felt like, the clock was ticking. Well, now it's like the clock just started and it's not there's the next year. Whereas like, when they lost to Tampa Bay, you're kind of like, man, is that the last time they'll be in that position? And then they lost to San Francisco. And that one really felt like the end of an era. And then last year they didn't even make the playoffs. So, I mean, that's gone. The days of zero expectations are gone because the Packers are going to be a team that is, I think, a trendy pick to get to and win the Super Bowl. I don't think they'll be favored. And I say that, and I'll say they won't be favored to win the NFC North because a team playing on Championship Sunday and a team I'm picking to go to the Super Bowl is playing on Sunday afternoon as well, or Sunday evening, I guess. But I think the Packers are going to be a trend, and I'm going to expect that. Me personally, this year, I think I picked them to go 8-9 and miss the playoffs. And that was my middle ground expectation, while also acknowledging they could. Like I said this last night, I made an admission on the Pack a Day podcast. After they lost to Minnesota, I had a Photoshop of Drake May in a Packers jersey in my phone because they were legitimate contenders. Whether anybody wants to admit that or not, they were legitimate contenders for the first pick in the draft at that point of the season. That obviously didn't happen. I'm thankful that didn't happen, but that is something that was true at that point. And then the turnaround from there, I mean, the ascension of Jordan Love and this offense was something that I don't even think the biggest of Jordan Love fans could have imagined at the beginning of the season. If you had told me what is the best case scenario for Jordan Love, I don't think they would have said this, because there were moments during this season, the Dallas game is an example of that. There was a throw on Saturday against the Niners where he's rolling to his left and throws a seed to Dobbs, where my opinion is he's making an announcement similar to the one that Aaron Rodgers made in that Arizona Cardinals playoff game, which is not just, hey, I'm the next dude in Green Bay, because the next dude in Green Bay could have been like the 12th to 15th best quarterback in football. He was sending messages similar to, I'm not Mahomes, because nobody is, and I think it's been pretty well established by this point. Mahomes he's one of one. He's in a tier of his own. Mm-hmm. But I can be in that group after that with your Justin Herberts and your Joe Burrows and Lamar Jacksons and Josh Allen's and guys like that. I think that's the type of message he was sending. I can be that. The fourth quarter kind of tells you then, yeah, we got a little ways to go. And growth is not a linear thing. And that's something we'll talk about a bunch on the show as we get into expectations for next year. But this year, I can tell you, and not even just because they made the playoffs, was infinitely more fun than last year. Last year, it almost felt like a chore to watch this team. And there were a lot of different reasons for that, both personally and just the way the Packers were constructed. I don't have to worry about what the quarterback is going to say on our frat boy punters show every Tuesday is a very nice thing. And then have to explain like, hey, why that's not a good thing that he said that in the media on the show about his receivers or his coach, or the infamous, I had my highest graded game of the season. I don't know what you're talking about, after a objectively shitty performance. Like, between that and everything else that just kind of went, with this season, and guys that are, Jordan Love is a fun guy to cover. He's an easy guy to root for. Aaron Jones, same way. And I know Jones was on the team last year, but that's true. Dontavion Wicks, after the Bear game, talking about the anniversary of his teammate that was like, tug at the heartstrings, why don't you? Jaden Reed has a similar story to mine, which he's a much better athlete. I don't need to go into that whole thing. But, I mean, Jaden Reed has a similar story to mine. That is something that is fun to, not fun to learn, but kind of fun to learn. The emergence of Tucker Kraft, the emergence of Luke Musgrave before we lost him. And then now you kind of have that to look forward to for 2024. Mm-hmm. What happens when Green Bay can unleash this, 12 personnel offense with Aaron Jones being spelled by Blake Corum and Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft as the tight ends? Like,
just had to slip that in. Just had to get that in.
Of course. I named my daughter after him, for God's sake. I didn't really do that, but, it was just a really fun team. And that was, I think, the hardest part of Saturday's loss was not even just that and yes, I do think they blew a chance to go to the Super Bowl, and they blew a golden opportunity, and one that they may never have again. That's just the way this works. But they were so much fun to watch by this point of the year. And it was, and that wasn't always the case this year. In October, you're talking about the rock bottom for me was like that Vikings game where they scored 10 points. Their defense stunk and their offense could barely, 10 points was a miracle that they got to that point. Then they became really fun to watch down the stretch, and just watching them kind of learn their identity, learn their swagger, learn their way of doing things. It was a lot of fun to go through, and I'm going to miss this version of the team because they were a hell of a lot more fun to watch, especially than last year's team.
Yep, and that is the best thing, and I mean this sincerely, that I think I can say about this year's Packers. And I thought it going into the do or die games against both Minnesota and Chicago to end the regular season, thought it going into the Cowboy game, and certainly thought it going into this 49ers game. The best compliment I can give them is that on a personal level, I did not feel ready to stop watching them this year. I wanted more of this team. I wanted to see continued emergence for Jaden Reed and Dontavion Wicks and, Christian Watson, who hopefully, and as we talk about things getting better next year and the expectations raised, hopefully what he goes through this offseason trying to figure out what's going on with his hamstrings, that's figured out, and he can get back to what we believe he can be, what he gave us glimpses of in his rookie year. More of Romeo Doubs just being open and making plays all the time. More of this quarterback who is a revelation. Aaron Jones playing out of his mind. All of these positive things. And you're right. And we've been over this over the last couple of weeks. And you know how I felt about the end of the Aaron Rodgers era. And I was on record online. It is out there for people to see. When last season ended, I said I would have brought back Aaron Rodgers. And I meant it. At the time, I absolutely meant it. But there was also something different about those last few years. And I think you fleshed this out well. Like after the 2020 season, that felt like that might be it. Like you don't get opportunities like this. You're not the best team, because I do believe the Packers were the best team in the NFL that year, or at the very least, the best team in the NFC. And had they gotten to a Super Bowl, they would have gotten to play against 5 paper clips who were on the offensive line for the Kansas City Chiefs. Who knows how that Super Bowl goes? But it felt like, damn, this was a golden opportunity and we missed it. Then it happens again the next year, and it's, God, this feels like a golden opportunity. Again, we got a second chance and we couldn't take advantage of it. And then 22, I mean, we know we don't need to go through it all again. We know all the drama. We know all the everything that came with the 2022 season. And while we all wanted them, well, some people were begging for draft picks instead. But while most people wanted this Packers team to make the playoffs, it sort of felt like, okay, the season sort of needs to end. Like the end of the road is coming. It's just a matter of where are we going to park at this point. This year, it feels completely different. To keep the highway analogy going, this is just turning onto the interstate. This is, you're on the Dan Ryan in Chicago, and the speed limit's 55, and you got to go like 900 miles an hour to live. Like that. Right. That's what this team is. Like you've got your whole life in front of you. And I'm excited, man. I'm excited about what this team is going to be. And we'll get to the expectations in a little bit. I do think it is worthwhile to go back and look at this game against San Francisco, the good, the bad, the ugly from it. And there was a lot of good. In fact, I think there were 3/4 of really good play and 3/4 of really good quarterback play. And we'll touch on Love specifically in a little bit. But look, in the end, you lose Zach Tom. That hurts. And I don't think that's the only reason why the Packers lost this game. That's a challenge, though, to lose Zach Tom, because he's been playing incredible football all season long, and especially as of late. Jordan Love has played awesome football for a couple months at this point, but he's still a first-year starter, and he's in his second playoff game, and the stakes were a lot higher in this one, A, because of what was on the line, but B, because he was been playing a bunch of front-runner frauds on the other side, and it was actually a game for the entire duration of the game. Like, this was a real battle against a team that is more battle-tested than this Packers team is, and we know all the problems and foibles that this Packers defense brings to the table, and those things all felt like they came to a head in that fourth quarter. And there's more that goes into it, because dropped interception by Keyshawn Nixon. You had the dropped interception by Darnell Savage that he could have taken back to the house the other way. The interceptions by Love. One was desperation at the end of the game. The other one was that terrible throw over the middle. I think it was Kraft who reached up, couldn't grab it, and it was tipped for an interception. I knew it was one of the tight ends. It's heartbreaking because the season is over, and because, like we've already pointed out, this was a fun team to cover, a fun team to watch, an exciting brand of football, and we wanted more of it. But it also, and I don't mean to sound like a loser or have loser behavior saying this, but it does feel different, I think, knowing the youth of this team, having trust that it's only going to get better, hopefully going to get better with age on the offense, with a healthier offensive line, whatever that ends up looking like next year, at least Zach Tom back. And then the defense, which I think will be different. I think will be coordinated by someone differently next year. Like, those are all reasons to be optimistic. So while it's disappointing to lose, and there are things you can clearly point to, like, hey, this is an example of maybe it's just playoff inexperience, and that's fine. But also, if you don't get that fixed, you're not going to get to that ceiling everyone's talking about you reaching now. There were a handful of those things, and frankly, it's always hard for the season to end, but there's at least a little bit of a taste of, oh, shoot, there could be something special coming in the near or possibly distant future. It's just crappy to have it be this team again, because they have been the unstoppable boogeyman for this franchise for way too long at this point, and it's hard for it to be them. It is really difficult for it to be that team again who stands in your way.
Yeah, and they are to us what we are to the Chicago Bears and the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, that's just Packer fans are pissing and moaning today. I can't see what happens because Frat Boy Punter is sensitive and blocked me on social media because I may have called him.
Did he really?
Yeah. Yeah. After the is Brian Gutekunst a smart person conversation, I said something along the lines of like, I can't believe people actually like, of course, Pat McAfee is going to stick up for his guy at the time, Aaron Rodgers,
right.
And whether or not their friendship is dissipated, I don't know. I know they kind of fired him, whether he was told to do that or not, I don't know. But he blocked me. But I don't know exactly what George Kittle said, but I know he said something to the effect of like, they can't beat us. And I know fans are upset about that, but like, it's true. And it is the same
Right.
thing as
Yeah.
12 yelling into Soldier Field stands, I own you all my life. Like, it's the same thing. So I'm not upset about that because it's true. And there's only one way to change that is to beat them. And,
Mhm.
the frustrating part of this game, like you mentioned, is this was the first time of the matchups in the last 10 years. They haven't won since Jim Harbaugh was the coach with Kaepernick in 2012. Like, the Packers have lost 5 playoff games to them now in that time span. So twice to Harbaugh and Kaepernick, and then 3 times now to Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garoppolo twice, now Brock Purdy once. This was the first time that
So
I
Jimmy
felt
Garoppolo 3 times.
essentially the same thing. Yeah. This is the first time that I felt like coming out of the game that we outplayed them.
Mhm.
And, because like in 2021 or whatever year that was a game where in the first quarter, I still remember this. I turned to Kyle Hoffenbecker after. So the Packers go down, for those of you who don't remember how the game went and haven't watched it since, if you're like me, but I remember this. They go right down the field. A.J. Dillon scores a touchdown. The 49ers go 3 and out. Zadarius Smith gets a sack, and this place is rocking. And Green Bay has the ball. Adams converts a first down, and I turned to Kyle Hoffenbecker, and I told him, we're going to beat their fucking ass, like, by 40. Like, that's how it felt in that moment. And then Mercedes Lewis fumbled, and all of the air got sucked out of the balloon at that very moment. And they just didn't outplay them the rest of the night. That's just how that was. I thought that Green Bay outplayed them for pretty much the duration of the game, and if it weren't for something, and I'm sure you'll ask me about this at some point, so I don't need to dive down the rabbit hole of the kicker yet, but like, if it weren't for a problem that were predictable, then now Jordan Love is trying to engineer a game-winning drive instead of a game-tying drive, and maybe he doesn't commit what is known in Green Bay quarterback room as a mortal sin, where he's throwing late across the middle. Like, that to me, honestly, both Jordan Love interceptions are the things that were the most disappointing to me. And I don't think it doesn't sway my confidence in him long term. It doesn't do anything. And I am late to the Jordan Love party, admittedly. I was not a day one believer. I was not a blind confidence guy. I did not crown him a franchise quarterback based on 10 dropbacks in Philadelphia last offseason. But once I said he was the man, which was basically after the Chiefs game, he's been the man. And to what, like, the wide delay that they ran to Tucker Kraft, like, there is no, like, if the pass that he threw to Jones ended up getting tipped and then intercepted, you could have been like, well, he wanted Jones to sit down or something. That's not how that play works. So he just flat missed Kraft. That's disappointing because I think they were running that play to set up to try and go for it on 4th down. And I love the aggressive mindset that LaFleur has had basically since Thanksgiving Day. But they were setting up to go for it, I think. And then you just miss him badly. And then the game losing interception was just, as soon as he threw it, I was like, shit. Because either that or like somebody is wide the hell open and nobody's over there. But as soon as the camera panned, I was just like, yeah, there's nobody out there. So I'm just hoping it falls incomplete. And like, again, like I said, he said after the game, and he said it before in pressers, throwing late across the middle is a mortal sin. That is a Tom Clements 101 thing. Aaron Rodgers has said that. I think Favre even said it, but Favre didn't really listen to that. That's a different story. But that is the most disappointing part to me, just because he hasn't done that. And it reared its head at the worst possible time, and then you figure out again, yes, he's a first-time starter, but I'm not really giving him a pass for what was a piss poor fourth quarter. That's the other reality, is it was terrible.
I get that.
And I do believe also on the flip side, this is a learning experience for him. And, maybe that interception is his equivalent of Aaron Rodgers getting hit in the face and fumbling the football and losing the game against Arizona that way. And Love is just lights out in the playoffs next year and the Packers win the Super Bowl. Maybe. That is the most disappointing part to me, other than because that wasn't predictable.
Mm-hmm.
The kicker, I'm sorry, going forward, his name is the kicker. I will not call him by his name, and I barely call kickers. I have a Bill Parcells way of thinking about kickers. Like, I don't even like talking to him. So the kicker was predictable. And I said after the game something along the lines like my guy True North here is saying like the Bills and the Bucks had guys miss kicks too. Yes, they were not the worst kicker in the league from start to finish this season, which Anders Carlson was. He led the league in missed kicks. I'm sorry, which the kicker was for Green Bay this season. He led the league in missed kicks. And I said after the game, it would have been forgivable if it weren't so predictable. Mm-hmm. And the overall, and this is maybe me taking up for a couple guys that I respect in the media and stuff like that. And you could certainly call me like biased in that way, but Rich Bisaccia, basically the way the Packers handle things that they don't want to answer, I do not like it. Matt LaFleur at the beginning of the season, basically saying, I'm not talking about David Bakhtiari anymore, even though it's a huge story, concern, et cetera. He's your best player, for God's sake. Mm-hmm. Of course, we're going to ask about him. And then for Bisaccia to just say, if you got questions about the 49ers, I will talk about the 49ers, saying I'm not going to answer questions about his kicker missing kicks. And it's like, well, why? And there were other options. Like everybody's clapback to me on the internet is, well, Crosby, Mason Crosby. It's like, well, the only option wasn't Mason Crosby. There were there's other kickers. Like Robbie Gould is one of the NFL's all-time leading scorers. Maybe he doesn't want to play, but did they even call him? I don't know. Probably not. There were other options. And if bringing a guy in while you're stinking up the place ruins your confidence long-term, then you're not the team's long-term kicker. Like there's no guarantee that the kicker is their long-term kicker anyways. Mm-hmm. And it seems like every year the Packers have this one big obvious flaw that needs to be corrected or their season will end because of it. And they don't do it. In 2020, for example, Tramon Williams should have played instead of either Will Redmond or even a hobbled Kevin King. In 2021, it was Mo Drayton as an unqualified special teams coordinator in the worst special teams unit literally ever. This year, it was the kicker. And all three of those things reared their ugly head at the worst spot. 2019, the run defense, and Raheem Mostert is still running. Mm-hmm. It's heartbreaking from the other stuff, and Carlson's not the only reason they lost the game. I hate that concept as well. Like when somebody's like, oh, he's not the reason they lost. Like, no, he's not the only reason, but he's a reason. So that doesn't absolve him of criticism for missing and now it's a 41-yarder. Like this day and age, that's a chip shot. Should be, but it wasn't. And that was the part that was predictable. I literally said to my brother before he walked on the field, I'm like, oh, here's Anders' weekly miss. Sure as shit. Missed a kick in 10 of his last 12 games. Mm-hmm. So if there's one thing I could ask the Packers to change, and I really like the way, I think the Packer way, if you will, has been exonerated this year after being drugged through the mud over the last 3 years by the quarterback in New Jersey. I think it's been proven to be most of the time the right way to do things, but sometimes patience isn't a virtue. And and I'll ask you this, Brendan, because I asked this last night and I haven't gotten an answer. So remember Mason Crosby sucked in 2012 and just seemed to miss a kick every single week. And they were defiantly loyal to him, but that didn't really pay off until 2013. He still wasn't very good to close. When is the last time the Packers were outwardly loyal to a player or coach, something that they stayed loyal to? And you're like, you know what? They were right. And they were right that season.
And they were right that season?
Right. So, for example, if they didn't cut Amari Rodgers last year and he was awesome for them this year, then that doesn't really count because he stunk. That's what I mean.
The one I can think of, and I've got to look up the box score of this game to see if I'm going to be correct in saying this. The one example I can think of, and he wasn't even spectacular in this game, sort of kind of loosely 2015 Devontae. That's one that I because we all remember drop Vontae. We all remember that dumb fuck on Twitter who was like, I would have kept Jeff Janis. Dude, that's comical racism to say that. And I know no one likes to play the race card. I'm sorry. I'm not usually that guy, but genuinely one of the dumbest things I've ever seen on the internet, which is saying a lot. I've seen a lot of quarters on the internet. Anyway, I mean, we remember that year for Davante Adams, and he has said since, like, I wanted to quit. I was miserable. I couldn't do anything. All of that. He was bad that year. I mean, he could not hold anything. Playoff game against Washington, if I remember correctly, he goes 4 for 48 with a touchdown. He got hurt in the game, but he played well, and he was playing a little bit better as that year went on. Now, to the point you were making, by 2016, it was, oh, shoot, this is the dude we saw as a rookie in 2014 and the player we thought he could be more accurately. 2015 was an aberration, and he is a historically good work ethic. Raj used to talk about that all the time, and he's a Hall of Famer. I think he's a Hall of Famer anyway, and I see you agree too. So, but that's the one that I can kind of think of that they were defiant about it, and it started to. It didn't fully pay off, but at least you could kind of see why they were defiant to it, even if it wasn't paying off. But no, I agree, and to the point real quick about Mason Crosby, because there was a lot of that all season, right? When Carlson would miss kicks, it was Crosby's out there. I love Mason Crosby. I own a Mason Crosby jersey, man. Like I love the dude,
jorts,
and I always will.
His leg all up high. There's some sex appeal with that thing, man. I cannot confirm this, but Mrs. Dworzinski became Mrs. Dworzinski. I am convinced because of that photo. I believe that her looking at that picture causes her to ovulate. I am almost certain of that.
So anyway, the point is, I love the guy, but you're 100% right. There are other kickers out there. There are other dudes you can bring it. Go get Elliott Fry. Boom. I gave you a name right there. Is he great? No. Is he at least giving you decent odds to make a 41-yard field goal? Yeah, probably. Like it's less so about the patience, because the Packer way, quote unquote, you're right, it has worked, but there's also a benefit of the doubt component to that. On the offensive side of the ball, I think Matt LaFleur gets the benefit of the doubt. Tom Clements absolutely gets the benefit of the doubt. The way they've built that side of the ball gets the benefit of the doubt because we've got 30 years of proof that is working, special teams wise. And this is somewhat rhetorical. Why does Rich Bisaccia get the benefit of the doubt? Because this is a guy who got a huge, and hand up, I was super excited about it because all the hype was, well, look what he did in Las Vegas, and they should have given him the job, and he's a special teams ace, and players love him. Okay, great. I was all in for it, especially after the god-awful stretch of Sean Menenga and Mo Drayton, among others before them. And do you know where the Packers special teams finished in DVOA this year?
I know they finished 29th in Rick Gosselin's special teams rankings. I will assume somewhere around there.
Wow, that favorable. Dang, look at Rich Gosselin, pro Packer, 31st. 31st in DVOA. How many teams are in the league this season? Second worst in the entire league.
There's 32 teams. That's bad.
Yes, the Rams are the only team that ended up finishing worst. Like, why would he get the benefit of the, and again, the defiance you're talking about, inferior. I don't want to talk about the missed kicks or whatever he said. Well, then have your kicker go make the kick, dude. Like, this is no longer, if it was week 18 and this team was 5-11 and playing out the string, and you essentially had 3 games at the end of the year that were evaluation mode, fine. I wouldn't care. I'd be frustrated, but so what? This is an evaluation time. This is, you're at that point, less than a quarter for a trip to the NFC Championship game with all this as your makeup of your team. You can't rely on that. And I don't think, and you've heard my complaints about Bisaccia all year, but you just can't rely on that. And I know fan base, 2 different rival fan bases would probably hate me for invoking this name regarding the Packers. This was Cody Parkey. This was the Packers Cody Parkey moment.
Man, I said that to somebody. That is, I remember, and it's funny because watching the fans defend Carlson on the internet were the same ones making fun of the Bears for trotting Cody Parkey out there every week, who then predictably double doinked in a playoff game. Like, again, if anybody in the chat in the world other than Anders Carlson's parents. And I'm not picking on Anders. It's not his fault necessarily.
No, because at some point it's not about him anymore. It's about putting someone that can't be in that spot. And that's a coaching and personnel problem more than it's an Anders Carlson problem.
And it's the same deal as it was a year ago with Amari Rodgers, whose decision? Oh, that was Rich Bisaccia's decision. And they lucked into Keyshawn Nixon. And they only cut Amari Rodgers after it became so obvious to apparently like an infant that he could not hold on to the football and catch a punt. Like they cut him. I even wonder if like Gutekunst just finally said enough is enough to get Bisaccia to bench him. Like Amari Rodgers never looked the part. And then he was bad. And then he lost his confidence. And then he was more bad. And
got trashed by the quarterback.
And I don't even know if he's still in the NFL. Like that's how much I've paid attention to his career since he got cut. But they got lucky in finding Keyshawn Nixon. Well, you couldn't even give yourself the opportunity to get lucky to find the next kicker because they never brought it. There was never a workout for a kicker that I can remember. There were no rumblings. Matt LaFleur said, we're seeing this through. They were far too married to their plan of the youth movement, which I understand paid off at receiver, paid off at tight end. Here's the difference. And here's what I was kind of talking about a little bit earlier, why the Davante Adams comparison doesn't necessarily apply, but I didn't explain that well. These are bottom of the roster dudes. Like they couldn't cut Davante because he was a second-round pick playing in his 17th game. Like completely different.
For what it's worth, who the quarterback also loved and adored from the very minute he got to the team.
Correct. So you put all that together. Amari Rodgers was an end-of-the-roster punt returner. Like, does not matter. Anders Carlson's a kicker. Like, the kicker should be your 51st, 52nd, and 53rd player on your roster. Long snapper, holder, kicker. Long snapper, punter, kicker. Guys you can get rid of at a moment's notice. Because that's how it should work. It's, again, it was predictable. Apparently to everybody except for them. And that stubbornness is something that they have to wear. And that is why at the end of the game, when I wrote my grades article, the coaches got the lowest mark, even though I thought they coached a good game in game, because that is a decision that they made weeks ago. And I am, again, like you said, I think I even said it during the year at some point too. It's all cute and dandy when you're 3-6 to have a guy missing a field goal. This is the difference between playing in the NFC title game in a building you've already won in.
Yeah. No, you're right.
They could have gone to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And they just
you're right. And
again,
and that's
not all Carlson's fault. I want to stress that more than it's not all his fault. I know that. But it was a problem that was easily foreseeable. It is like watching, knowing that the starting quarterback stinks and the backup is better, and you won't flip them. I don't have a great example. Like I think back to like when Kurt Warner had lost his mojo and Mark Bulger was clearly better for the Rams, but they wouldn't make that switch because his name was Kurt Warner. Like I understand, but that is the way that this ended up playing out. And it was a kicker. It was a kicker. Like, again, this isn't a guy you made a huge investment in. He's a kicker. They're a dime a dozen. Brandon Aubrey is the best kicker in the league this year. They found him from the United States Football League. Go Battlehawks. Or whoever signs Trey Watson. But you can find him and it didn't have the choice wasn't Mason Crosby or Anders Carlson. There's other kickers. You just gave me Elliott Fry. I said Robbie Gould. Whoever. I don't care. I don't care who it is. Yeah. Even if you just bring in some competition.
And that's just emblematic of the general point here, because you're right. And I know we're bagging on the kicker and a couple of specific things, but it's emblematic of the overall problem at the end of the game. And for what it's worth regarding Love, because I know you mentioned this earlier, I wasn't trying to give him a pass for making mistakes because he's a first-year starter. I'm just saying sometimes that comes with the territory of having a first-year starter who hasn't been in this spot before. And he sucked in the fourth quarter. He was awesome for 7 playoff quarters. And in the 8th one, which ended up being the most important one, he was quite bad. And that's unfortunate and something he'll have to wear, this team will have to wear and get better for and get better from going forward. But it's just a combination of the stubbornness on special teams, your young and incredibly talented quarterback who's still not quite a complete product, making horrible mistakes at the end of the game. The defense, which all things considered, played a pretty decent game, but when it mattered the most, let the 49ers just march right down the field. But again, we've been over that specific thing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times at this point. Just a total combination of everything that you couldn't allow to go wrong went wrong in those final 15 minutes. And as this is more of a superstition thing than an actual analysis thing, as soon as they showed that the Niners are 0-30 in games where they're down by 5+ in the fourth quarter, I leaned to my wife and I was like, this sucks. I wish they had not showed this because I feel like crap. That's just me being a superstitious idiot. That's not anything like really founded in seriousness. Real quick, when it comes to Jordan Love, because we've already talked about the end of the game, over 3 quarters worth of the game, he was really good. He was awesome against the Cowboys. He had been awesome since even slightly before. Well, he was improving before Thanksgiving, but since Thanksgiving, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the entire NFL. And, this offseason will be filled with talking about what's next, all that, yada, yada, yada. My question for you, instead of like a tape review here, is when do you get this extension done? Like, you've got to get this done yesterday, right? Like,
yeah, the first day he's eligible is May 1st or 2nd or whatever that is. So May 3rd.
And it should be written up and notarized and read over by lawyers and agents by 11:59 the night before. So, the league day starts at 3, whatever. You know what I mean? Then you can sign it as soon as you are eligible. Like, I believe he has proven he is the guy. I don't think he is a finished product. I don't honestly believe we can say like, oh yes, in the pantheon of elite quarterbacks, he's in there now. I don't think it's fair to say that. I'm kind of in the Rodgers camp here. I don't think it's fair to him to say that already at this point. Could he get there? Absolutely. If he plays like he did the second half of this season, he abso-freaking-lutely can be in that class of quarterbacks. But I think he has at the very least proven he can get there. His baseline of quality, again, save for 2 terrible passes against San Francisco, that was raised over the course of the year. His peak was even higher than we saw at the beginning of the year, too. He's the guy, and I think, honestly, Jacob, as soon as he is eligible for this, you get it done. You put pen to paper, you lock him down, and you go from there.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you what I told one of my favorite residents after they beat the Cowboys, and that is all you need is love. So, he's a Bear fan, and he gives me crap like every single day of existence. So that's my guy. Can't tell you his name because that's a HIPAA violation, but that's my dude. Like I said, I'm late to the party. I am not a guy who just blindly believed in Jordan Love. And like I said, when everybody says like, oh, do you remember when people were mocking Drake May and JJ McCarthy and Jaden Daniels to the Packers? And yeah, me. Hi, it's me. I did it.
How many times did you say Jonathan James McCarthy on this show?
Before or after the national title?
Before.
A lot. And like, here's the thing is you go back to October.
It was fair.
Yeah, you go back to October, Jordan Love and the offense, not just him, Jordan Love and the offense stunk. And I thought the team stunk. So when the team stinks, it's the same argument I had over and over again, and we don't need to rehash it. But when everyone was like, oh, they're going to get Jordan Love, Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, if you're in position to pick Marvin Harrison, you do not have a quarterback to throw him the football. So get Caleb or Drake or whoever you end up thinking the third guy is. So don't have to worry about that anymore. They have 5 top 100 picks that they can use to build around the franchise quarterback because he has proven that, you said this earlier, his peak is MVP of the league. Like that stretch of play is MVP level football of the entire league. His floor, I mean, yeah, there's going to be some Matthew Stafford-y type. I think Matthew Stafford's actually a really good comparison for Jordan Love if they can clean up some of the decision-making. He doesn't quite have the rocket that Stafford has. And hopefully he doesn't take the beating that Stafford did throughout his career either. But just some of that, what the hell were you doing type interceptions. I think those are things that are just, he's not going to do it. Like he's not going to throw 16, 17, 18 picks a year. Like I thought maybe he would have, but he's not going to throw like 5 either. So it's a little bit different. The performance review from the season is what a rise, man. Because like you said, when we did this show before the Rams game, I picked the Rams to beat the Packers knowing Brett Rippon was starting. just because I had no
Yeah.
faith in the offense to score any points. And I thought, like, all Rippon's got to do is hit one pass to Puka Nacua and away he goes. And all of a sudden it's 10-0. And can Green Bay get to 10? At that point, you didn't know. And Matt LaFleur, to his credit, and kudos Jason Wilde for writing this story, said things had to change and they had to be more aggressive. Like, the mindset after that kind of became the F it, we ball thing. And I think that's what the young people say now. I don't know. But they were awesome from November onward. And Thanksgiving Day is where we'll be able to point to as like the turning point of the season, which is funny because then, you know, they won those two big games and then they basically gave those games back shortly thereafter. Draw it up, man. He's the guy. And, you know, something that Matt LaFleur said that stuck with me through the season to where I was like, okay, maybe like it's not over for Jordan Love because we're not completely out of the woods on the season yet. But after the first game when they won 18-17, there's a couple things. First of all, you can hear Rashawn Gary, who's one of the team they don't have captains, but he's one of the team captains.
Yeah.
Like always screaming and shouting, stop playing with him. So they buy in that way. The other thing is Matt LaFleur saying that guys in the locker room are willing to fight for Jordan Love. And then Keyshawn Nixon, after the Chiefs game, he outduels Patrick Mahomes on Sunday Night Football. Patrick Mahomes is probably the greatest quarterback I've ever seen play. Shout out to everyone else, I guess. Sorry to Tom Brady fans for saying that. But Keyshawn Nixon like looks and he just gets this wry smile on his face and just kind of says, 10's good. Like, I knew that. How did you not know that kind of thing?
Yeah.
And he was awesome through the whole year. And, you know, growth is not linear. Something that is like a precautionary tale. Bill Huber wrote something today about the Jaguars. I talked about last year's Eagles. Like, Jalen Hurts was a guarantee to win a Super Bowl at some point in his lifetime. And now people call him a tush push merchant because this season didn't go so good.
Mm-hmm.
That's the, you know, the balance and the rub. If you want to start talking about potential outcomes for 2024, I think the Packers are going to be a contender. I think Jordan Love is going to be good. I think he's going to raise his level of play. You know, when we do those stupid quarterback tier things, Packer fans are probably going to try and want to get you to call him an elite quarterback. I don't think that's fair to him yet, like you said, because the other reality is he's played 9 really good games, maybe more. I don't have a list in front of me.
I know what you mean.
But, you know, he's played 9 really good games, some other not so good ones. You know, what if he is the player from the first 5 games of the season? Then what? That's when you got a bit of a problem. Now, I don't think that's the case, and I think the Packers got some dudes in this, you know, locker room and everything that'll make it. So the nice part about next year is I likened this year to 2019, except it wasn't with MVP quarterback and MVP receiver. And everybody's learning everybody and trying to learn some stuff on the fly. Next year could be 2020 where everybody's back and they added to it. Because I don't know if they're going to add like a receiver or a tight end, but I do think they'll add a running back, an offensive lineman, you know, just stuff to kind of stabilize that ship a little bit. Maybe the defense is better. The special teams basically can't be worse. So you get a little bit better that way. But yeah, Jordan Love is him, as the young people like to say. And I don't think there's any question about that. I don't think there's any question the locker room believes in him. And that, to me, when we talked earlier about like lasting impressions of this season, you know, coming into the year, there were some questions about Matt LaFleur and how good of a coach is he? And, you know, was it just Aaron Rodgers and Devontae that made him look good? And there are some really credible people that thought that. And it was a fair question, but not anymore. And not just because of the way the Packers made the playoffs. Do you know how hard, we talked about this before the season started. Do you know how hard it was for him, number one, to navigate the fact that the quarterback the starting quarterback for the first 3 years of his coaching tenure, 4 years of his coaching tenure, holds a grudge against you because, according to Matt Schneidman's article before the season started with Aaron Rodgers, 12 basically said like, well, they wouldn't have picked this quarterback if you didn't sign off on it. So he's kind of pissed at you the entire time he's there. Granted, they had a really good partnership and won a couple MVPs that way. How hard it is to navigate that. And then I promise you, coming into OTAs and training camp, there were people on this roster that thought Aaron Rodgers should still be the quarterback in Green Bay? Players, coaches, how hard it is to get that buy-in from everybody, because guys like Preston Smith, Kenny Clark, David Bakhtiari, like people that know they're veterans and, they don't have many more bites at the apple to just say, hey, we're going with this kid and away we go. To get that buy-in, to me, that is the biggest feather in Matt LaFleur's cap to date. And that is something that I think he learned a lot about himself this year. I think he'll admit as much later. And I think that's something where he should be a coach of the year candidate. He won't be, because I don't know what Matt LaFleur has to do to get a coach of the year, because he probably should have at least one already. But
Yes.
With the way this year went, kind of hard to go against Kevin Stefanski with winning with you and I playing quarterback at some point during the season. But nonetheless, I think Packer fans also, I had a Bear fan say this to me yesterday. I think Packer fans take for granted just how good of a head coach he is. Does he have his flaws? Certainly. Every coach does, from Bill Belichick all the way down to whoever you think the worst coach in the NFL is. Like, all of those guys have their flaws. Does Matt? Certainly. But he's a very good coach. He's very good with the locker room, very good game planner, very good play caller, all that stuff. Green Bay's lucky to have him. I think he's proven. It's like that last scene in Remember the Titans when Coach Yo says to him, "You were the right man for the job." Yeah, Matt LaFleur was the right man for the job with Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love. And I don't think people understand just how hard it is to be both of those things.
No, it's extremely difficult to be both of those things. And I think going forward, and this is a reflection of Jordan Love and the rest of this offense. And again, who knows what the defense is going to look like next year. I am of the belief that Joe Barry is not going to be back. And if I may soapbox really quickly for just 1 second, I could really use personally, without the, oh, woe is us, I want to kill myself because I don't like the defensive coordinator for my team. And this one coded word, this one cryptic sentence from a season-ending press conference in which the head coach is already pissed at media coverage of something he said, so he's trying to be extra careful about what he says. The fact that he, I lost my train of thought momentarily. I was getting so worked up about this whole thing. But the Joe Barry thing, shut up. It's going to happen or it's not. And I get so sick of the, oh my God, it's all over because Matt LaFleur didn't directly say I'm firing him and I hate him and I want him dead. Like, that means he's coming back. Can you give it a day? Can you give it a few minutes to breathe and let this happen? And it amazes me year after year, team after team, that people bitch about coach speak, but then are completely unable to read what coach speak actually is. Like today, and I think it was Peter Bukowski and among others who pointed this out. Like, Matt LaFleur is asked about Joe Barry, and I'm going to go at my own pace. He's asked about Tom Clements. Hell yeah, I want Tom Clements back. Like, guys, come on, we're adults. Put 2 and 2 together here. Like, that doesn't guarantee that Joe Barry's gone. Nothing he said guaranteed that he's not going to come back. But we don't need to do the, oh my God, this is so bad, I'd rather eat arsenic than watch Joe Barry coach again. I can't be a fan. Like, can we stop? Can you please just calm down for a damn day? Do
you remember, how people make their political views like their entire personality?
Yes.
That is kind of what has happened with the fire Joe Barry thing. It's it's part of their entire, people literally would say to me, can they win the Super Bowl and fire Joe Barry? Who gives a fuck if they win the Super Bowl? I don't care if they hire me to be the head coach next. They won a championship. Who cares?
Be a nice pay raise.
I would love it. I would love it. That'd be great. I'll take NFL money. But that's the point I'm getting. Right. If they win the Super Bowl or they beat Dallas and everybody's like, oh no, does that mean they're going to bring back Barry? Can you just enjoy the fact that your favorite team won a playoff game?
No, I agree.
How are you people not? This is why, I said, this is why I don't do politics, because people that do politics are miserable 24/7. It looks like. So and this is why I don't do the coordinator stuff, because people that do that with the coordinators, you guys are miserable. You can't enjoy the fact that people my age and slightly older and a little bit younger, the Cowboys were like the boogeyman. One of the first teams you learned how to hate. And we beat the piss out of them. And you couldn't enjoy that because you thought they might bring back a coordinator? Who cares?
No, I'm with you. It's too much for me. And again, I think he should be fired because I don't think he's good at his job.
And I think he will be.
But you can believe that and not have a freak out, an apoplexy every single time that you think maybe something is going to work against your personal beliefs about who should be coordinating the defense. That's all I think. Again, my belief is that there will be someone new in charge of the defense next year. It will at least be a little bit different. So let's say the defense has an opportunity to get a little bit better. The growth for the young players on offense, the growth for your quarterback, special teams, who's to say? But all of that combined, that brings on higher expectations. And that was talked about after the game. That was talked about during, exit press conference this week and saying goodbye to the players and all of that. I understand those things, but it is the reality of the situation. And I think you illustrated this really well, Jacob, earlier on in the show. Like, this season was a one-off. The fact that you could be, and I know we had a comment in here earlier that was joking about the house money phrase, and I think it is overused as well, but you got one shot to be the plucky underdog team and to have your roster that even next year will be really young. Like, 1 year, one offseason is not going to mean that Jaden Reed is a grizzled vet, right? Like, they're still going to be really young next year. But you know what we found out? They're also really talented, and they've got the ability to win and to look very impressive on offense. And again, I hope the defense next year under someone else's leadership will at least look a little bit improved. That brings on higher expectations. You are no longer wow, look at the Packers go. Look at what Jordan Love is doing. No, then it becomes Jordan Love is great, hypothetical. Jordan Love is great. Now you got to go keep being great. Or you end up, like you pointed out, Jalen Hurts. Who is standing around right now saying like, oh man, Jalen Hurts is in that top tier? Nobody. Absolutely nobody except like Elliott Shore Parks in Philadelphia. Like, that's the only person who's out there saying that right now. Yes.
What a name pull. Holy shit.
Right. Like that. The expectations need to be met. Next year, it's not, look at these spunky receivers. No, it's catch the damn ball. Like, the expectation is now not that, wow, like they might flash. No, the flash period is over. It's the go win and be great period that you are entering. And that's a privilege, to be frank. Like, how many franchises have never had that moment? Like, even the Lions, who were everyone's pick to win the NFC North this year, they've still got this like general feeling around the NFL and around football fans. Like, man, look at the Lions go. Like, how nice for them. Isn't that cool? What a great story. When they were like one of the trendiest picks to go to the playoffs of any team in the entire NFC this year. You're the Packers. This is a privilege to be in a position where the expectation is that you contend for Super Bowls. So while it's concerning because now your margin for error totally drops off a cliff and you got to go win and you have to get back to the playoffs and you're expected to win divisions and win conference titles and win Super Bowls, but that should be a good thing. That should be further proof that this system in Green Bay is indeed working, that you've got a quarterback you think can get you there, that you've got playmakers on offense who you think can get you there, an offensive line, maybe a defense that can help get you there. That should be the expectation. And again, I think it's a privilege for this team. The expectation should be high, and optimistic fan or not, I believe this team is in position where they can meet those. Maybe not win the Super Bowl next year, but you heard me say it very start of this season. Like, we're talking training camp editions of the Pick Six this year. I think I tweeted it a handful of times. I've told people that live near me who have to hear me talk about it. I've said it on the radio, all of these things. 2024, I think, is going to be a special year for this Packers offense. Second year, historically, the second year as a starter in this offensive system is the explosion year. Go ask Matt Ryan in 2016 what year two with Matt LaFleur as his quarterback coach was like. Yeah, we all saw it. We know what that was like. We saw what it was like for Aaron Rodgers in 2020. Aaron Rodgers, who was already a Hall of Famer when Matt LaFleur showed up. First year, Packers won a lot, but it wasn't an efficient year by any means, like an analytically darling kind of year for Aaron Rodgers. What happened in 2020 in year two? MVP. And I'm not saying that Jordan Love is going to do that. And like I said earlier, that's not fair to put that kind of expectation on him immediately. But that is what we should want out of this offense. You should want these expectations to be raised. I know I do, because the expectation as a fan of the Green Bay Packers is you're going to contend for Super Bowls and you're going to win Super Bowls. And I'm glad this team is going to be in that stage next year. That is where you should always want to be as an NFL fan. And I'm glad about it. I'm happy that that is going to be next season what we are talking about. And hopefully at this time next season, we're talking about a pending NFC Championship game appearance. And that's what we should want.
Yeah, before the Packers played in Super Bowl 45, I still can hear Sam Elliott's voice of that intro video, which is awesome.
Awesome.
Like, the first of many, many tears that went down my face that day was during that video. Just because I couldn't believe it was our team that was playing in that game, just all that stuff. But where he says expectations, and he says, well, in a city named Titletown, odds are they're pretty high. It's like, yeah, that is, pressure is a privilege, is what you were kind of saying. And Garrett Cole says that all the time. I don't know if he originated that statement, but that's who I've heard it from. The Packers didn't have that this year. Like we're saying, the house money drink joke earlier is true, but anything after making the playoffs in the grand scheme of things by the general consensus was gravy. Well, those are gone now. Those days are gone. Mm-hmm. And I hope you guys enjoyed the 1 year of respite on that, because next year you said you're not going to pick them to win the Super Bowl. And I mean, it's, January, so I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but it was not a realistic expectation for the Packers to win the Super Bowl this year. It just wasn't.
Yeah.
It is a realistic expectation, I think, next year, barring some unforeseen retirement by Jordan Love, and we're starting Sean Clifford. Like, other than that, realistic expectation, in my opinion, for the Packers. And I think this is part of it. This whole thing by my guy, Argenis Rashad, and I'm sorry if I butchered that, buddy, but I do believe, from being around the team this year and last year, that there is some, and I've heard this story before, so that when they traded Favre in 2008, that the feeling around the organization was kind of like, okay, we can move on. And it was kind of like a breath, and it helped that Rodgers was good, right? Mm-hmm. If Love was bad, then that everybody would be like, man, are you sure? Like, it wasn't that bad with Aaron here. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
That was a possibility, but that didn't happen. I will say, though, I do think it weighed on this team of the quarterback kind of playing the here's me and here's the other 52. And I know there's different rules for different players, and I understand all that, and we don't have enough time for me to go into all that. But I do think it matters that the quarterback is basically saying we're going to attack this offseason to win a championship. And there's something to be said. One of the differences, and there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of luck that goes into this and all that stuff too, but one of the differences between Dan Plucker, my guy from, I know him from Maize and Brew, but I think he used to be on what is now the defunct 1250 station. He was a producer. Said one of the differences between Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady is Aaron Rodgers is throwing a hissy fit during the offseason, and Tom Brady, after just winning the Super Bowl, is taking steps toward becoming a champion again. And I do think it might be small, it might be big. You could certainly decide how much that matters. But I do think there's something to that when you have, I'm sorry, the quarterback. Like, I understand, like, we'll do the whole, like, oh, does it really matter when Jair Alexander doesn't show up, like, to OTAs this offseason? The whole voluntary thing, that matters for everybody except for the quarterback. The quarterback, the face of your franchise, has to be there. Those are the rules. That's what you signed up for when you decided to be the quarterback, the leader, the face of the franchise, all that stuff. I think there's something to that Jordan Love has now established himself. And the standard is like, hey, remember, like, they can say, remember San Francisco and remember this. And we want to be better than that going forward. And we're not playing the retirement game. We're not playing the I'm going into a darkness retreat. We're not playing the I was retired, but you didn't FaceTime me, so I'm sad and my feelings are hurt type stuff. And like, just all those things. So I do think that matters.
Hey, we got about 30 seconds here before we're going to get frozen out. So real quick, Super Bowl prediction. Who you got?
Detroit and Baltimore, and then Ravens flock. It's the Harbaugh family year.
I'm going to go with the 1 seeds. I'm going to give you chalk. I think the Ravens are the best team in the NFL, though. So I'm going to take Ravens over 49ers in Super Bowl 58. Sadly, no Super Bowl for the Packers this year, but we have had a blast week after week getting to talk to you about Green Bay Packers football. This week included, even though it's always a tough episode. For my partner, Jacob Westendorf, I am Brendan Dworzinski. We appreciate you for listening to the Pick Six, and we'll talk to you on the other side right here on our beloved network, Game On Wisconsin. We'll talk to you next time.